Welcome to Midnight Terrors, where the shadows whisper and the truth is darker than fiction. In the stillness of night, when the world holds its breath, we bring you 3 spine-chilling true horror stories in every 15 to 20-minute episode. No faces, no distractions, just immersive narration that crawls beneath your skin, paired with haunting soundscapes and minimalist visuals that let your imagination paint the nightmares. From unsolved mysteries to encounters with the unknown, each tale is meticulously crafted to deliver pure, undiluted fear. 2 new videos arrive weekly, like clockwork. Taunt your feed with stories that linger long after the screen fades to black. This is horror, stripped to its core. No fluff, no filler. Only dread. Subscribe, if you dare to listen in the dark.
This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm a senior in high school, and I've lived in Arizona my whole life. There's not a whole lot to do here, but one thing my friends and I have always been into is urban exploring. We'd search for abandoned buildings, old drainage tunnels, forgotten shopping centers, anything that felt lost to time. We'd climb through broken fences, snap photos, sometimes even sneak up to the rooftops or down into basements. It was never about vandalizing or stealing. It was about chasing that eerie, forgotten feeling. The guy in our group who always found the craziest spots was Ethan. He was the quiet, brooding type, and he somehow always had a new place to check out. Half the time, I didn't even ask how he found them. One day, he sent us a screenshot from some sketchy Instagram page. It had barely any followers, super blurry photos, and the comments were downright creepy. The caption said something like dozens of abandoned mine tunnels hidden across the Sonoran Desert, if you know where to look. Ethan claimed he'd been DMing the account owner, and they gave him some general coordinates to explore. That was all Ethan needed to get fixated. That Saturday, it was me, Ethan, and our other friend Kyle. I had a beat-up Wrangler that was perfect for desert driving, so we took that. We didn't have a real address or anything, just a pin dropped somewhere in the middle of nowhere. The spot Ethan picked was way out past any town, deep into the desert. We left the main road almost half an hour before, and the dirt track we were following barely looked like a path anymore. We drove and drove through endless nothing. No signs, no structures, no hint of civilization. Just an ocean of dry, cracked earth. I kept checking my phone out of habit, even though I knew we had 0 service. Kyle was sitting in the back seat, getting more and more annoyed. He started telling Ethan this whole thing was a scam and that he'd been trolled by some weirdo online. But Ethan wouldn't let it go. He kept insisting we were close. He's always been ridiculously stubborn when it comes to navigating. Just when we were about to give up, Kyle pointed off to the right. At first, it looked like just more desert, but when we got closer, we saw it, a half-collapsed wooden structure jammed into the side of a rocky slope. Part of the entrance was buried, but behind the rotting support beams, there was definitely a black hole disappearing into the earth. It wasn't huge, but it was man-made. It was a mine shaft. Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just pulled out his phone, dropped a pin, and then gave Kyle a smug look like "told you." Kyle rolled his eyes and said Ethan just got lucky. Even I had to admit, it was insane we actually found something. We parked a few yards away on a flat patch of dirt and geared up. Ethan had even packed masks for us, which I thought was overkill at the time. The 3 of us climbed up to the entrance. It looked even more dangerous up close. Ethan picked up a rock and tossed it in. We waited. 1, 2, 3 metallic clangs echoed back up. Then nothing. It was deep. Ethan looked over his shoulder and said if we slipped, we weren't getting back out. We started making our way down. Luckily, it wasn't a straight vertical drop. It sloped down at a steep angle, but still walkable if you were careful. The ground was loose and dusty, and ancient wooden beams stuck out of the walls at random intervals. It got colder and colder the deeper we went. The light from the entrance faded until it felt like we were inside the belly of the earth. Finally, the shaft leveled out and opened into a wide tunnel that forked off in multiple directions. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Rotten beams, rusted rails, splintered wood, and a thick, choking layer of dust on everything. There were scraps of metal and broken tools everywhere, like time had just frozen. It smelled stale, almost metallic, and the masks we wore were the only reason we weren't gagging. We picked a tunnel and started walking. None of us really said much. The place swallowed sound. We weren't looking for anything specific, just soaking in the atmosphere. Honestly, most of it looked stripped clean. But then we heard it. A faint noise. Distant, but unmistakable. It sounded like something being dragged across the ground. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but when I glanced at Ethan, he was frozen too. Kyle motioned for us to kill our flashlights. We clicked them off. Now we were just standing there in total blackness, listening. The scraping sound came again. Slow. Closer this time. It echoed weirdly off the stone walls, so it was hard to tell how far away it actually was. We stood there for what felt like forever, barely breathing. The dragging kept getting louder. Closer. Then, Kyle fumbled his flashlight, just a quick flicker of light, and everything changed. The dragging stopped. Total silence. Then, deep in the tunnel ahead of us, there was a loud metallic crash like whatever was being dragged had been thrown to the ground. Right after that, something screamed. I don't have the words to explain it. It wasn't human. It was raw, violent, and wrong. We didn't even look at each other. We just ran. I've never moved faster in my life. I could hear something pounding the earth behind us, gaining. I was in the back, trying desperately to keep up. That's when I tripped over something buried in the dirt. One of my shoes came flying off. No way was I stopping. I sprinted half barefoot, feeling every sharp rock and splinter tearing into my foot. Ahead of me, Ethan and Kyle were already climbing the shaft incline. I clawed my way after them. The pain was unreal. Every step was like stepping on broken glass. I was practically sobbing with panic and adrenaline. Somehow, I made it to the surface. I collapsed into the blinding sunlight. Ethan and Kyle dragged me toward the Jeep. I could barely stand. Kyle jumped behind the wheel and punched it before I even had the door closed. We didn't look back. We didn't stop until we made it to the nearest hospital an hour away. I was shaking so bad, they had to help me inside. I ended up needing a tetanus shot and had to get dozens of splinters picked out of my foot. Even after all that, I couldn't walk properly for days. Whatever was down there, we were never meant to find it. And I know, deep down, it's still waiting. A few days later, once I could walk without limping like a pirate, Eli admitted he'd dropped his wallet somewhere near the mine shaft, probably when he was helping me hobble toward the Jeep. He hadn't said anything at the time, but now he figured it was worth a quick trip back, just to the entrance. No way were we venturing inside again. So the three of us, me, Eli, and Mason, drove back out to that isolated ridge east of Durango, Colorado, using the pin Mason had saved on his phone. Unsurprisingly, Eli's wallet was nowhere to be found, but we did discover something else, my hiking boot. It lay a few feet from the yawning mine entrance. I crept over, heart pounding, and picked it up. The leather was shredded, as though someone had gnawed on it. There were unmistakable teeth marks, entire chunks torn away. We didn't stick around long after that. None of us could come up with a sane explanation. You might assume some desperate drifter was holed up down there, but if so, how had they survived? No food, no water. What could they have eaten for months? Mason later told me the Instagram account that lured him here never replied when he DM'd about our discovery. It'll be a long time before I go urban exploring in these parts again. I've always been a rugged type, grown up camping and fishing rather than fancy resorts. My girlfriend of 6 months, Maya, feels the same. So a couple weeks ago, Maya and I decided to do something different. We drove 4 hours south to Goblin Valley State Park in Utah to camp for a few days. We'd done forests, mountains, and lakes, but never experienced the vast, silent, arid isolation of the desert. It felt like something we had to try at least once. Plus, the stargazing there is legendary, a big draw for both of us. Early in our relationship, we'd lie on my old pickup's hood just outside Albuquerque, tracing constellations with our fingers. So when we found a legal, remote campsite with only fire rings and total darkness, it was a no-brainer. We packed the truck and made the 3-hour trek on a Friday morning. The final hour was on a rugged dirt road that felt endless. No houses, no signs of life, just red rock and sagebrush. By late afternoon, we found our spot. The landscape was empty, perfect. The first 2 nights were idyllic. Warm days, cool nights, crystal clear skies. We'd sip a beer by the fire, pass around a small portable speaker, and talk nonsense or just lie back and watch meteors streak by. No schedules, no distractions, pure freedom. And yes, we get cozy in the tent. That was part of the fun too. It felt incredible to be unplugged. But both nights we heard something odd, distant as though miles away, a low, drawn-out moan, more like an animal than a person. The first night, we paused mid-laugh and locked eyes. Maya mouthed, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We shrugged it off as coyotes or mountain lions. The second night, right around the same hour, the sound returned. Again, we joked it off, just desert wildlife doing desert things. Then came night 3. I woke to slow, deliberate crunching outside the tent. Footsteps on dry, gravelly soil. Not an animal. They were too consistent. I froze, heart hammering. I wanted to grab my flashlight, shake Maya awake, but my body wouldn't budge. The steps halted a few feet from the fabric. Then total silence, just me staring at the tent ceiling, waiting for something else. After what felt like hours, I heard a flick, the unmistakable click of a lighter. A small, steady orange glow bobbed against the canvas, waist height. The flame hovered, then began to swirl slowly, painting ghostly shapes on the tent walls. I held my breath. Then the glow intensified, a torch, now blazing bright. I heard a dull thump as whoever held it dropped something to the dirt. Then whoosh, the side of the tent burst into flames. The heat hit like a furnace. Within seconds, our sanctuary was an inferno. That jolted me from my stupor. I shook Maya awake, and she screamed when she saw the flames. We sprang into action, no time to think. We hurled gear out onto the sand. Backpacks, sleeping bags, everything we'd brought. Maya grabbed a half-empty water jug and doused the fire, while I stomped at the blazing canvas, ripping it away until the worst of it was out. Half the tent was toast. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the perimeter. No sign of anyone. Maya packed what remained of our stuff, and I joined her. We set off in the pitch black, aiming for the truck. No landmarks meant we were stumbling blind. After a few minutes of frantic walking, we realized we were hopelessly lost. Then the horror hit again, that scream. Faint at first, then joined by another, and another. An orchestra of anguished cries echoing across the valley. Not one voice. Many. Tortured, animalistic shrieks coming from all around. I didn't say a word. I grabbed Maya's hand, and we broke into a run. By some miracle, we spotted the headlights of our Tacoma in the distance. We flung ourselves inside, slammed the door, and tore off down the dirt track. I kept the pedal down, my knuckles white on the wheel, adrenaline jacked through my veins. The road was rough, the high beams cutting through the darkness, each bump threatening to flip us. We didn't slow until we hit pavement and saw other cars on the highway. Maya collapsed against the seat, sobbing quietly. I fumbled at her side, trying to calm her while my own heart hammered. We called the Forest Service and the local sheriff to report everything. They listened politely, promised patrols, but as always, there's only so much they can do in a place that vast. We drove home in silence, the night screams still ringing in our ears. I promised Maya we'd never return, and I mean it. Some places are deserted for a reason, and some nights should remain untouched by travelers chasing shadows. Everything I can't stop thinking about is how, if I hadn't been such a light sleeper, Lena and I might have ended up dead that night in the middle of the desert. That memory sets the stage for what I'm about to tell you. I've always been uneasy about my mother's past. Mysterious isn't quite the word, but it's the closest I can get. She was born in Guatemala and spent her childhood there before moving alone to the States to earn an undergraduate degree. After that, she met my father, Marcus, and settled in Colorado. Beyond that, she shuts down every question about her life back in Guatemala with a joke or a quick change of subject. My dad always chalked it up to childhood trauma, but as I got older, I realized she'd mastered dodging any probing about her family. The only solid detail I ever got was that she grew up in a border town near Belize. No grand name, just a dusty municipality with a bad reputation. She once quipped that her father's family were the politicians and her mother's were the criminals, but she never let on which side was which. I took it as dark humor until I started to wonder if there was more truth than punchline. When I was about 10, I woke up one night to use the bathroom and passed through the dark living room. I heard her speaking in hushed tones on the phone, her voice unfamiliar without English. She repeated a name over and over, Hitch, but not as if she was talking to him, more like she was describing him. The room was pitch black, so I flipped the light on. She didn't flinch. Instead, she ended the call, fixed me with a look I'd never seen before, and told me to go back to bed. That incident remained buried until nearly a year ago. I had graduated college and was driving across New Mexico to visit my old roommate, Dylan. It was an endless stretch of highway, and I'd grown tired of music. Not a podcast person, I started scrolling my contacts list, calling old friends, random acquaintances, just to keep the car ride from growing silent. Eventually, I rang my mom. We both obsess over soccer, so we dove into Champions League predictions, her deep knowledge filling the cab with excitement. Then, without warning, 2 black pickup trucks screeched to a halt, blocking the road ahead. No wreck, no warning lights, just trucks and desert. I slowed and glanced at Mom's name on the dash. Before I could warn her, 3 men burst out of the vehicles, all holding handguns. My heart stopped. I glanced in the rear view, another car barreling toward me. Compliance seemed my only option. A man rapped his gun on my driver's door, signaling me to step out. With trembling hands, I obeyed. My mom stayed on the line. She hadn't hung up, and my truck's engine droned. Within seconds, my wallet, keys, phone, everything was wrested from my hands. Then one of the men climbed into the cab. That's when something clicked. Mom was still on speaker. Through the tinted windows, I watched him lift his finger to hang up, then pause, almost like he sensed he was hearing her voice. He held the phone, his lips moving in Spanish. I didn't understand the words, but I was sure he repeated H's name a few times, testing the pronunciation. The other 2 men must have realized what was happening because they dropped their vigil over me and closed in on the truck. The man inside rolled down the window, spoke to them, and suddenly they all turned back to me. They handed me my belongings, except for the cash in my wallet. One of them smiled and said, in broken English, tax. I never felt so relieved to lose every dollar I had. As I peeled away, all 3 pickups and the trailing car roared off into the night. I had no license plates to note. None of the trucks had tags. Shaken, I called my mom back within minutes. What just happened? I demanded. Calmly, she told me she'd threatened to call the state police. You know, mother knows best. She said she was tracking my GPS ping and knew exactly where I was. I called her bluff, insisting on the truth. She stuck to her story. It was mostly her begging in Spanish that saved me. I want to believe her, but I no longer trust that everything in her past was harmless. Was H really some contact she dreaded? Or had those men recognized her voice and name? The memory of those 3 armed men, the desert's empty expanse, my mother's whispered warnings, all of it twists together into something I still can't untangle. All of these questions swirl as I navigate my days here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I know one thing for sure. However it started, whatever her secrets were, the echo of that night drives home how little I truly know about the world and about the woman who raised me. Even though I didn't buy her story for a second, there wasn't much I could do except pretend to accept it. I asked her to call the police for me, and she agreed without hesitation, her voice a little too steady. Eventually, we hung up, and I drove the rest of the way to Abilene in complete, soul-crushing silence. Honestly, I tried to shove the whole experience into the back of my mind. Pretend it didn't happen. Pretend the desert hadn't almost swallowed me whole. But time is a way of dragging these things back to the surface. The more I sit with it, the more convinced I become that my mom, Camila, was tied to something dangerous back in Guatemala. Maybe it wasn't just in her childhood either. Maybe she never really left it behind. Maybe part of that world followed her here, just waiting for the right moment to surface. And the part that chills me the most? She knows I'm not stupid. She has to know that I see the holes in her story. So how much longer does she really think she can keep pretending everything is normal? I've thought about just confronting her, laying it all out, demanding the truth once and for all. But every time I imagine it, I feel this sick fear twist in my gut. What if I push too hard? What if the truth isn't just unsettling, but dangerous? What if knowing drags me into a world I'm not ready and will never be ready to be part of? I'm standing at the edge of something I can't see clearly yet. But whatever it is, it feels like once I step over that line, there's no stepping back.